Okay, so in the first video, we talked about the mindset you want to have with problem solving, which is that the reason you have CEOs in the first place is because you have someone who decided to want to start a company. And in starting that company, the reason was to solve problems and to provide solutions to the target market. So if you're going to work with someone like that, you also must have a problem solving mentality, and you must have a bias towards action, because that's the only way you can solve problems. Um, if you do not have a bias towards getting things done, resolving issues, you would be much more interested in other dynamics of the issues, especially the people part of the issue, like who's responsible for this, whose fault it is, do we have the capacity? Or, although the question about capacity is a very important one, but at the end of the day, the bias towards action simply says, if there's a problem, you have to own it and then work towards resolving that issue. And if you're working as an assistant, someone like me who's worked as an EA and VA to a CEO, the advantage to having someone in your corner is so that you can ask them to get things done that move the needle for you. And the other thing about the mindset of a CEO, when especially when they're working with an executive assistant or a virtual assistant, is that they they want you to own the operational side of their of their work. And in owning the operational side of their work, you give them the opportunity to focus on more strategic things and high level client relations. High level client relations means dealing with the, the customers that provide revenue and that helps them keep the business going forward at a successful level. So that's really what high level client relations means. So I am effectively responsible for owning some of these administrative slash operational side of things, so that my CEO can be in the best frame of mind to do absolutely what they love. What's called the zone of genius. That is to say, they would only be concerned with the things that they want to be concerned with, because and yeah, you have to think of it in this way. If you have grown a company to a point where you can afford to have an executive assistant, the only reason you should be having an executive assistant is so that that person can make your life better, or as one of my CEO clients used to say, make your life easier. And of course, it's the CEO's responsibility to allow the EA to play that role, to own this task. But it's also your core responsibility as an executive assistant to have the mindset that you got to problem solve the issues that you find. So in chapter 2, he talks about the team, and I have highlighted some of the parts that I want to focus on as we read. But I'm not going to do this consistently, because I think if I've already read it, then I'm just telling you what I've read. But the goal here for me is for us to also read it together. So I just wanted to do this and see how my presentation flows, different from if I had to read everything to you. But I'm still going to read anyway. So it says starting a company is hard. There are long hours, constant fear of failing, many rejections, etc. The burden is further intensified if you try to do it alone. So, lesson here, you do not want to do it alone. And he goes on to give reasons why a CEO shouldn't be solo in the company. And of course, there are exceptions. Someone like Sarah Blakely, who started Spanx, she owned the company 100%. So when she sold the company for over $1 billion, she effectively became a billionaire because she didn't have to share equity. So you were going to get to the point where he talks about these exceptions here, but he effectively says that solo founders have high rates of burnout, and the emotional burden is just too high. As with any trend, there are exceptions, but the rule generally holds. And it gives this example about Y Combinator. And Y Combinator is in case you don't know what Combinator, it's an investment firm that takes founders in their early stage. Sometimes I think they have something like an ideation phase or so, but I think usually it's when you have an MVP, that's when you can apply to Y Combinator. And if you apply to join Y Combinator, they effectively take you. Provide you with funds, provide you with training, and the supportive environment to go build a company. Yeah, and I think they also take a share of the business. I'm not sure, but fact check that. So it says as a strong the Y Combinator has strong bias toward accepting co-founder teams versus solo founders. So if you have a co-founder or if you're considering a co-founder is right is really good. First of all, it tells you about the emotional strains of of the, of running a company. And then it says if you have a co-founder, you're effectively sharing that emotional side of things. But in a moment, you're also going to see why you shouldn't be sharing like 50-50. So it's owning much of something. Okay, so Y Combinator prefers that you you have a co-founder to get in. And then it says owning much of something is better than owning 100% of nothing. So the idea is that you be interested in owning the bulk of the company. And the reason is if you find a partner, someone who has complementary skills to yours, share the emotional burden with them. That will ease the load significantly, give up a large percentage of the company. It's worth it. So the advice is find a co-founder, give up large percentage of the company because it's going to be worth it. Now, large percentage doesn't mean you should give out something bigger than what you keep. It says here your partner's purpose is not to be value added forever. This is the second important point that it makes here about partnership. The first point is that you need a partner not just to enter into investment relationships like Y Combinator or firms like Y Combinator, but also because it has an emotional benefit. And even more importantly, it says if you give out a share of the ownership of the company, it's going to be worth it in the long run. So people are usually like interested in 100%. And in the case of Sarah Blakely, who owned 100% by the time she sold Spanx, um, she effectively did was make herself a billionaire. And if she had a partner whom she gave 40% of the company, she would have been a centimillionaire, all right? But the other partner would have taken the emotional burden of running the business too up to that point. And then it says your partner's purpose is not to be value added forever. And in being value added forever, it simply means when you have a partner or you're negotiating with a partner, do not think that they're going to be in for the long haul, um, and that up to like 50, 20 years later, they'll still be adding value to the firm. So it's not like you shouldn't expect it. Of course, it's a natural expectation, and financially, you cannot have a partner 20 years down who isn't contributing to the business. That's going to affect the business. But the purpose it says is not to be value added forever because you're going to get to a point where it says as your company grows, you will likely find people with far greater skills whom you will hire. That's okay. Your co-founder's purpose is to help you achieve success in your march towards product market fit. So that should be the front burner. I'm thinking about a partnership here. So she says effectively the front burner for me is to have a partner who can help me get to product market fit as soon as possible. If that is achieved, then the purpose of that partner is fulfilled. The partner, according to Matt Mochary, especially at the founding stage of the business, is not necessarily supposed to be in it forever or continue working forever. Their own interests may change, uh, but it says the goal of a partnership from day one especially when you're building the company, is to help you accelerate product market fit. Once you get there and begin blitz scaling, there's a book titled Blitz Scaling by LinkedIn CEO, by the LinkedIn CEO. I haven't read that book yet, but that's another book that I should read. But it uses the word blitz scaling. So blitz scaling is from blitz and then scaling. That is to say, to scale a business fast to a global like how do we put it? Maybe multi-million naira, not naira, like multi-million dollar equity. Like you really make it big. For LinkedIn, the founder who now LinkedIn has over 1 billion users, I think that's a huge share of the social media market size, but it's also a significant amount of money in terms of finances and ownership. So if you're blitz scaling, you're simply trying to get the company to a point where it is financially prosperous in a very short amount of time. And you don't just want to do it in a very short amount of time, like you also want to do it so that it can continue in that optimization successfully, I think. So that's just a rough on it. But I think there's much more to that book, and that's another book that I'm going to read. So it says once you get there and begin blitz scaling, be pleased if they continue to add value beyond that point. So as it says, the point is to help you get to market. The partner is to help you get to market fit. So in working as an operations person, sometimes you're going to be working with a CEO who owns part of the business and then he has a partner. And so effectively, whatever you're doing in managing one CEO, you might be meta thinking, that is thinking beyond that one CEO to look at how that CEO's efforts affect the entire company and the perception of that effort by the other person who owns the company, especially if you are on the company's payroll. So it means you no longer have like one person that you um, that will overall appreciates your contributions, but you also have a second person who, if they don't feel like you're contributing very much, it could tilt the relationship to not be in your favor. Maybe that's a stretch of the thought, but essentially, in being an executive to an executive assistant to a CEO, I think that the dynamics changes slightly differently when you're working for a CEO who owns the entire business than when you're working for a CEO who owns part of the business. And when you do find a partner, avoid one cardinal mistake. Do not create 50-50 partnership. It says don't do it. While 50-50 sounds like an ideal, it actually leads to real pain if there is no way to break a deadlock. So, unanimous decisions are tiresome to create day after day. Knowing that one person has the ability to decide actually eases the burden for all involved and leads to further outcomes. So, a 50-50 partnership will affect the decision making process because you now have two minds who are thinking about one thing and they would likely think about it in different ways. But if you have one person who owns the majority of the equity in that business, the equity is simply like ownership percentage. It's just another word for ownership. It's a financial term in investment for ownership. So if you have like a 60-40 um, partnership, the person who has 60, whenever they get into a deadlock, can easily just resolve it because they have the ownership, right? So um, it's it's better that way in decision making because it helps you to make decisions quickly. Then it cites someone called Alex McCall, founder and CEO of Clearbit. Right, this is key. Two of my previous companies were destroyed by 50-50 split. So in terms of decision making, 50-50 isn't good at all. So that's what he's saying. From Peter Reinhardt, founder and CEO of Segment, shares from Peter Reinhardt, founder and CEO of Segment, shares a different perspective. Okay, so Peter Reinhardt, that's from shouldn't be there, but Peter Reinhardt shares a different perspective. There are ways to avoid deadlock, e.g., third co-founder with small stake, a la Sham, and splitting evenly. Aside from that, you have been totally fine. That has been totally fine in my experience. This is Peter Reinhardt talking with both Segment and Sharp. So Peter Reinhardt is the CEO of or started two companies called Segment and Sharp. And then this person, Peter Reinhardt, is saying that there are ways to avoid the deadlock. And that is to have a third person. So if you have a third person, say like the company is the first person, the main founder has 50% of the business, then the other two founders have like 30-20. So even where you have like um equal amount of equity among the three co-founders, majority takes the decision. So it's better to have two votes against one, and that would help accelerate the decision making process than to have like one versus one. So that's the different perspective that it shares. But Matt Moshary's position is you shouldn't, number one, be a solo founder if you can, and then number two, if you are a co-founder team, you should one person should have the majority stakes. But then he admits that other people have done it differently and they were successful. And then he says, in all of this, there is a big exception. If you have done this before, have the majority of skills needed to start a company, and are a masochist. The masochist is like sadomasochism. So that's yeah. So that's really somebody who finds pleasure in pain or in challenges. In this case, who doesn't mind having to go through the tedious process involved with starting a company from scratch? So he says, if you are that kind of person, then by all means go on it alone. Start your company alone. And then he says from Alex McCall again, the key for me in doing it alone is a strong friend group that supports me. So if you're going into it alone, then make sure you have a strong support group. And there are founders, solo founders who belong to different communities. One of the communities now that I would recommend is Tiny Empires. I'm going to do a video about Tiny Empires later, or maybe even do one of their courses for us to see what it's like to be in that community. And then the other thing about chapter two is the team. It says, while it is critical to have a partner to share the emotional burden of starting a company, each additional team member, that is co-founder, partner, or employee, adds additional complexity in geometric fashion. So that is to say, the more people you have, the the greater the complexity involved in terms of communication. And communication is one of the biggest things, and the decision making, right? So it says each new member must somehow grok the priorities. Let's look for the meaning of the word grok, but I think I didn't check it when I was flashing through it initially. But I think the word grok has to do with to balance out. But um, there's no law that says we can't check the meaning of that now. So it's not that kind of grok. Yeah, grok meaning. Okay, let's just add it here. Meaning. So it seems that word is incorrectly spelled in that document, because this is the one that's available. Understand something intuitively by empathy, establish a rapport. So I got it wrong. So each member must somehow grok the priorities, maybe provide empathy in terms of prioritization to understand how this person prioritizes. And so because you have that relationship, right, it can help determine priorities for the organization, vision, and actions of the other team members in order to place their efforts in the same direction. So If you have a team, there will be complexities, and other people on the team would affect the way you prioritize things and forward. So it says the more team members you have, the geometrically harder it is to share what is currently going on with everyone, as well as have everyone be emotionally brought into the decisions being made. Do not underestimate this cost. It is much larger than most founders think. So essentially, what is leading with is the smaller the team, the better. And it goes on to say, why see that's why Combinator has another strong belief. Founding teams should never grow beyond six until there is true product market fit. And the other major part of this is product market fit. It says here later I will dive into what product market fit is, but for now, let's say it's greater than $1 million in recurring revenue for an enterprise company. So $1 million, it doesn't say at this point if it is annual recurring revenue or monthly recurring revenue, but in recurring revenue, what that simply means is the revenue that comes in per time, whether it's monthly or annually. So it has to be greater. If you have product market fit, it has to be greater than 1 million in this substance that you choose to calculate by. So he says, unless you have gotten to a point where you have that product market fit, that is, you're essentially a company that has found a huge market share and you own that market share because people are paying for the services you provide to that market, right? If you've gotten to that point, then you can have a bigger team. But if you haven't gotten to that point where your recurring revenue, whether by month or by year, it would have been nice if you stated it at this point. But we'll get further down to that point and we'll see um, whether it is monthly or annually. If you haven't got to that point where you're $1 million in recurring revenue, then you shouldn't be having a team that is larger than six. And it gives three reasons for it. The first one is morale. Morale simply means the confidence, enthusiasm, motivation that everyone on the team carries. Until product market fit is achieved, the company must be able to adapt to negative customer feedback and potentially pivot the company. If you're a small team and you're building the company, you're building products and services, if you get negative customer feedback, then you're going to take it and then use that to shape the product, to shape the entire company, right? It's smaller, it's faster to do when you are a small team than it is to do when you're a much bigger team, right? Because if you're a much bigger team, everyone is reading this negative customer feedback. The chances that they would want to pivot to would be very slim. Why? It says here, no matter what you say to them, when someone joins a 10 plus person company, they expect stability. That is to say, if you have a team larger than 10, everyone has different priorities. They're working at different things. So if you're thinking about building the company, it's going to be harder to carry the entire team along than when you have a small company. I mean, a lean company like six people and under who matter the most, like that is at the ownership. If there are six people and under, and you find that this product doesn't help you address the needs of the market, but you notice a different pattern or a different problem that you can solve differently, or maybe add to the initial product slash service design you had. If it is the case that you are smaller in a team, it will be easier for you to get to that point where you can just change. That's what pivot means. You can change the company structure, you can change the product, you can even change the market that you address. So because the market should tell you whether you should pivot or not. And when the market tells you to pivot and then you are in this big team, the chances that you'll be willing, everybody will be willing and enthusiastic about pivoting will be smaller than it is when you're just a small team. So if after 6 months you launch your first product and customers don't instantly rave about which is what will happen. Yeah, even 6 months later, he's simply saying 6 months later you launch a product and you don't have the market isn't crazy about it, like raving about it, which is what will happen. The team will become demoralized, right? If it's a big team, the team will become demoralized. Then you have to carry everybody, like motivate people. It doesn't matter how many times you have announced beforehand that you're still a startup and the team should be ready for this. They will hear the words but not internalize them. Why? Because their mindset is around stability, right? But if you're a small team, it's easy to carry everybody along. It then says, by contrast, with six or less people, the environment feels like a team in battle. Chaos is expected. So when chaos is actually encountered, the team meets it with glee. That is happiness, like they're enthusiastic about solving the problem because they're smart and they're looking at everybody's eyes. They can feed off each other's energy. People who join small teams crave the challenge of new things. They want things to be hard. So the second reason says communication and organization. When you are a few people in a room, you all know what each other is working on without having to formally report to each other. This has tremendous value as it allows you as it allows you all to stay in sync without requiring a formal management system, which would suck up significantly time and headspace, even if done very efficiently. Still the same point. If you are a small team, communication is way less better. Why? Because you don't even require like a formal communication management system, right? You could just hop on a call or just do a WhatsApp call, whether it's phone call or WhatsApp call. It's always easier to carry a small team along than it is to carry a bigger team. Once your team grows large enough to not be able to sit next to each other in one room, that is more than 20 in one space or even one remote worker, then suddenly information sharing by osmosis disappears. Now, you will need a formal management system to succeed. Information sharing by osmosis disappears in big teams. So, information sharing by osmosis simply means you can just easily feel the energy of the next person when you look at them in the eyes. You know what they're thinking about because you'll most likely be working in an ecosystem together. You can tell what the other person is thinking without being told, right? But in a much bigger firm, it's it's a lot more difficult because then you have to create a management system for all that. So efficiency. The third reason it says small teams are better is in terms of efficiency. When you are just a few programmers, then there is no choice but to write prototype code. So prototype code is the basis for especially a software company. Prototype code is when you're starting. That's the first thing you want to achieve, the prototype, right? So prototype code, it says this is code that is meant only to create a prototype and brings along with it a lot of technical debt, as opposed to industrial code, which is meant to be easily debugged, handle many users, etc. The reality is that your first product should always be viewed as a prototype. So the small team knows that the first product they may have spent months building is still a prototype. That is in the last product that they are going to capture market share necessarily with, right? But the big team is already has worked, like everybody has worked to maybe the point of exhaustion, and then you tell them it's still a prototype. Wow, that's like telling them, oh, all the work that we've done so far, we're going to have to do them times two or maybe a very good product that captures market share. So it says that's what it means by the reality is that your first product should always be viewed as a prototype. You are using it to gather customer feedback only. And that feedback will inevitably vastly alter what your product is, usually to the point of it becoming a completely different product. Again, market feedback is important. Market feedback will tell you what that product should be completely. Take WhatsApp, for example. Now, WhatsApp does things like scheduling video calls and so on. But initially, WhatsApp was just text, right? And then they added audio. So you could record audio. Then they added um, what did they add? Status, storage status, and all that. And now you can do lots of things with WhatsApp. But the WhatsApp that you have today isn't the WhatsApp that you had 5 years ago. It's a completely different WhatsApp. And how did they come about this new WhatsApp version? Because they kept on listening to feedback. What were people saying they needed? What were the features people requested for, or what challenges were people having on on the platform that they could solve? And that's how WhatsApp has become this um, huge communication platform. So it's no longer a chat uh, app. It's now way bigger than that. Today you have WhatsApp with their customers. This is a different vision of WhatsApp from the one the founder initially had. But that's usually what happens with product development, right? It changes as time passes. You may have a roadmap where you've documented all of the features that you want to add, but then as the market uses it and demands changes, you just pivot sometimes to features that you did not initially see at the beginning. If you have a small team, you can efficiently pivot better than when you have a big team and then you're trying to pivot. And it says, and feedback will inevitably vastly alter what your product is, right? So we're ready to that point. So all the efforts you put into making this initial code beautiful will likely be wasted. If you are small, there will be no. And then, if you are a startup in Silicon Valley and have discovered a large potential market, then you will be able to raise significant capital early. So usually Silicon Valley is like you have investors who are interested in building companies or financing companies. But these investors, because they provide you with huge capital, it's really not their fault if they say, "Oh, my money is in your hands. You got to start giving me returns." And it's not like uh, returns than what they have invested in. That's the whole point. Will allow you to hire many people because they've given you capital. They want you to hire people, right? Investors may pressure you to do so in order to win the race to market share. What is his position on this? Resist this pressure. It is misplaced. Startups don't usually fail because they grow too late. Look at WhatsApp. I think until WhatsApp, for example, until they were sold to Facebook, WhatsApp was running with about 10 employees. You can fact check that, but the story about WhatsApp being very lean and then building a global platform that had and became the WhatsApp that they are now. They were using a small team, and then even with the load of work they had, they still operated lean. And then it says here, resist the pressure to hire people because investors will give you money. They want market share. So they will inevitably tell you, hire people, get us the market share. Don't do it. That's what Matt Mochary is saying. So if you're probably watching this, I don't know how big your idea is, but essentially, maybe if you're still at this point, then maybe you should be hearing this. This usually it says they usually fail because they grow too early. They don't fail because they grow too late. WhatsApp grew late. Like I think at the point where WhatsApp grew, it and started hiring more people. They should have maybe done it earlier, but the founder wasn't interested in doing that. He just kept on using a small team and solving, developing the products, building the company, and then it eventually sold. And look at what the product is now. So they usually fail because they grow too early. That is to say, before they have achieved product market fit. So this next it, but then this is like a course, not your typical. Oh, let's forget about that. If you're still watching, then this is important. Let's continue. What is product market fit? I define it as having created a product that customers buy it after their test phase and recommend it. That's a product market fit. Product market fit is like, oh, people in the market, users. So now they will not just use it, but they will recommend it. So like WhatsApp in the early days, when people noticed they could chat with people in different countries for free, everybody recommended WhatsApp. It was the same thing with Facebook, right? Easily like that. That's how you know you've captured market share. When people are so excited about using it to solve their problems, and then they're excited about telling other people about it, you've captured market share. So metrics that show whether PMF, product market fit, have been achieved include revenue, renewal rate, NPS, that is net promoter score. So net promoter score is simply a metric system that measures how much how much positive feedback people give, I think, about the products that they use. So the first goal of the company should be to achieve real PMF, that is real product market fit, not metrics that fool people inside and outside of the company that PMF has been achieved. So let's note this. There is something called real PMF. So I think he's going to explain what real PMF is. So he says for a B2B company, know that enterprise customers have budgets just for testing new technology. So there's a budget for testing new technology in B2B companies, and will buy your product to do just that. So already you have like a potential capital that is existent even when your product isn't where it's going, because people already have budgets. B2B companies already have a budget that says they are going to use that budget to acquire new technology, to test new technology. So if you are a new technology that solves a problem for them, they're going to buy it and test it, even when it's not ready for full scale launch, because they already have that money waiting. This does not mean that you have achieved PMF. For these types of customers, only long term contracts are an indication that they actually value your product and they want to use it. So, while that is a potential indication of success, that is, maybe you're doing something right, right? Because the money is already there and then they've spent it to acquire your tool. It says that it is not the indication of real PM, real product market fit. The only thing that will be real about that kind of budget is if there's a long term contract that says they will pay for this product even while you develop it over a long period of time. So it says there is no magic metric, but for a B2B company, it's hard to imagine PMF at anything less than $1 million ARR. So that is annual recurring revenue. Remember, I was saying it didn't indicate if it was monthly recurring revenue, but now it's saying that you know you have product market fit if you have a monthly recurring revenue of $1 million, not $100,000, but $1 million of annual recurring revenue. So scaling. So once you have achieved product market fit, that is the right side, that is the right time to blitz scale and win the race to product market share. Okay, if you have achieved product market fit, you have like $1 million annual recurring revenue, then you're ready to blitz scale. To do this, you will need to create massive awareness. So there is a necessity for strong marketing. Okay, that's blitzscaling. You need more people to buy your product, so you have to invest into creating that awareness. Walk many customers through the sales process, which is sales. So there's something called customer education. It's both a function of marketing and a function of of sales. That is when you launch, when a new product gets into the market, people don't know about it really. But by the time you have achieved a annual recurring revenue of $1 million, then a good amount of the market already knows what your product is and what problems it helps them solve. But it says here that you're still going to continue making that awareness. You As you try to acquire millions of new customers, you have to invest into educating that new acquisition to understand the best way to use your product. Because if customers are successful in using your product to solve their problems, then you would also be successful. It says hold those customers' hands as they set up and use your product or service, customer success. So when you get to the point of $1 million ARR, you are not just interested in marketing and sales, you are also interested in your customer success. Okay, harden your infrastructure to withstand many users at once. DevOps. So what? You're becoming a big company, so you have to invest more. People are usually opposed to doing this investment, but what he's saying is if you've gotten to you've captured market share. You have to resist the temptation of not investing into sales, marketing, customer success, and DevOps. And not just that, you still invest in engineering, which is to get rid of technical debt as well as add all the features promised in the roadmap. That is what your engineering team will do. And then it goes on to say you're going to update the product roadmap to meet the most urgent needs of your customers. Learning product management now, so I'll do a course on product management. So let's share what I'm learning. But I just love these terms, and now I understand these things better seeing them in his book. Update the product roadmap. So product roadmap is a document or it could be a dashboard that shows all the features you want to put into or all the goals you want to achieve with your product as at when. Okay, so all the non-technical operations, non-technical operations, people, equipment, training, and HR, finance, legal, office, you're getting bigger. So you have to invest in all these other things. But until you have product market share, don't bother so much about these other things. That's inevitably what it's saying. And when people get excited and they get investors' capital, they just start investing into all these other things, but they haven't achieved product market share yet. So product achieving product market share is sort of like the best indication that you are ready to invest in other things. So until you get to that point, you have to do very good work to get to the point of product market share. And as an executive working with a CEO, I think the load of work is going to be heavy on you in terms of supporting the operations before they achieve the product market share. So if you're working with an executive who hasn't gotten to this goal yet, inevitably your work is going to contribute to helping them get to this point. Until they get to this point, man, what that simply means is you're going to be doing the work of other people, potentially other people, because you're going to be carrying a huge share of the burden too, in terms of administrative work and operational supports that you provide. So when they then get to 1 million annual recurring revenue and they've captured market share, then they can invest into these other things. But for small businesses, they can't afford these other things. But if they can afford you to support the operations, then it means you are inevitably contributing to helping them get to this point. And until they get to this point, the load of work is going to be tremendous, so to speak. All of this requires hiring talented and experienced people to fulfill those functions. Now, let us capture this, please. I think it was Steve Jobs. I think I have a quote produced on my website. Steve Jobs says, "You don't hire smart people to tell them what to do. You hire smart people so that they can tell you what to do." And so the mentality is different from when you you have achieved product market share. Like it is now less about you and what you know. It's now about the great people that you hire and what they know and what they do to drive the company forward in the company's vision and mission. So first, raise the money needed to hire this team and then begin hiring. At the point where you have um, where a business has gotten to this market share, they wouldn't be doing lots of hiring. But when they get to that point, hiring becomes ultra important. The business fails or succeed. when it 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 gets to a point of hiring more people. So once you bring on remote workers and your team scales beyond 15 to 20 people, most likely things will begin to fall apart. You will hire very talented people and they simply won't perform in the way that you hope or expect. You will end up doing more and more work yourself, working longer and longer hours just to keep the company afloat. You will extrapolate this trend, not extrapolate. You will extrapolate this trend and realize that soon you will break. Why? It says once you bring on remote workers and your team scales beyond 15 to 20 people, so things will start to fall apart because it's now a different feeling. It's you have things like culture and so on and so forth. And remote workers, level the CEO of level has talked about how important remote workers have been to his team, especially remote workers helping out with operations because they take the bulk of operational administrative things from their executives, and then the executives focus on only two things like strategy and then high level client relations. They focus on the optimal things for the business. Then the other administrative things are sorted out with remote executive assistants. So level is one. I'm going to do a video about level. So let's go to level.com. There's levels. I think I remember it to be levels. So the CEO of Levels did an interview with Tim Ferriss. So this is the company. Yeah, it's a really good company. They are in the health space, but I really like what the CEO has achieved in terms of using executive assistants and offshore teams to support their internal work. It says they've been great. Um, uh, at the company, and that if they hadn't hired remote workers slash executive offshore executive assistants, they would most likely have not have achieved the amount of success that they achieved. He said that in a Tim Ferriss interview. So remote workers are good. Executive assistants, the potential and the benefit has been established that they are very resourceful. However, it says it is at that moment that you need to implement a formal management system. So when you get to product market fit and you have a good share of the market and you've expanded your team, you must have a formal arrangement. So, like, there's an emotional connection between CEOs at the early start and their executive assistants because at the beginning, you have like really good, you have direct one to one relationships and so on and so forth. But as the team grows and the company starts scaling, there's going to be a formal process um, created for even you and your CEO. So it's not going to be as informal as it used to be, and so sometimes that can be very interesting to watch. But there's going to be a formal management system inevitably. So um, when the company grows, it's going to need that. So you now have a formal management system, no longer direct calls and so on and so forth. You don't have that informal communication style that you've always enjoyed, but you may still have some of it. But the point is that as the company grows, it needs to establish a a a different um, system to manage all that communication. So it says it will be painful. You will no longer be able to just work on the product. You and your team will likely have to spend one full day per week preparing for and participating in and one on one meetings. You see, so the team is bigger now. So a lot of things are changing. These meetings and this system will feel like pure overhead. They are. And without them, your company will never scale successfully. So it's really important to have a formal management system as the company grows. The good news is that the same system that allows your company to operate well with 25 people will also allow it to operate well with 25,000 people. Neither the system nor the amount of overhead will change. it is only a one-time hit. So there's nothing to worry about. Inevitably, that's what it's saying. Manage 25 people will roughly require the same energy and system to manage 25,000 people. And that's the point of having a system in place so that you don't always have to repeat things that you might as well just create a system to handle. The rest of this book walks through the implementation of such a system. So this brings us to the end of the first part of this interesting book. I'm enjoying the reading, and well, usually when you create something like this, it is for you, the user, to enjoy it more than I am enjoying it. But I hope that you're enjoying it too. So this is about building a mindset that helps you think like an executive yourself. So and I think personally, with just being a one person doing one to one services, when I offer such services, as I now have a website, I'm creating this video and I'm uploading them on YouTube. The load of work is different, the mentality is different. So some of these ideas are going to be ultra important, very essential, vital for you personally as well. It's bringing things that I've read before into frame, and then it's exposing me to things that I've absolutely not paid attention to. And as I'm edging, like getting closer towards my goal, I am increasingly realizing a lot of things that I need to change in terms of attitude, in terms of system, in terms of operations, the way I work, in terms of communication. And I mean, look at me now, I'm doing video again after since like 2024, and this time the flair is different. Then I was doing it. I don't. I think I did it then to sort of like create the brand, but now I'm doing it because I want to share my lessons, and you never can tell where this is going. But the point is, this is not just about the company, especially if you haven't started a company yet. This is also about you and the mindset that you have when you're working with the company. So we've just done one section. Now we'll be going into individual habits, and I like individual habits because it's about philosophy and psychology, and I like things that deal with mindsets and how mindset informs operation and informs reality. So the next phase, the next video is going to be about habits, part two, individual habits. And then we're going to do chapter three in the next video, which is getting things done. Bias towards action. I didn't know about this term until late last year when I was applying to be an executive, to join an executive agency. And it's just nice. I'm excited about it. So see you in the next video.